Welcome to the Grizzly Times podcast with Louisa Wilcox, a place devoted to all things grizzly, where we interview scientists, managers, landowners, and others about their perspectives and experience with grizzly bears and their ecosystems. This comes at a critical time in the debate about grizzlies, with the recent restoration of endangered species safeguards for the Yellowstone bear, but a new proposal to strip protections for glacier grizzlies, and when warming temperatures and development are transforming the bear's world. We hope that you find the information and views offered here helpful in shaping your own conclusions. You can find us on YouTube, SoundCloud, Stitcher, and iTunes. This is Louisa Wilcox with Grizzly Times, and I'm delighted to be here today with Gabriel Paun, who is an environmental activist from Romania. Gaby and his colleagues have been here for the last couple of weeks, and we've been sharing stories of our history and experiences with grizzly bears. Grizzly bears in Romania are a stunning story. Many people don't know that they've got maybe 7,000 grizzly bears in Romania, and a lot more people than we do here in the Northern Rockies. Gaby has a degree in ecology and an amazing breadth and depth of experience. He served as an activist with Greenpeace, and in 2009 he founded the group Agent Green that works on animal welfare, forestry, and wildlife issues. Just last year he won an enormous European environmental award, Euro Natur, that has also been enjoyed by people like Nelson Mandela and Mikhail Gorbachev. Gaby's doing an incredible job to ensure a healthy future for grizzly bears in Romania, which for many people who don't know is the bear country of Europe. We are so delighted to talk to you today, Gaby.
I'm delighted as well. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. So maybe to start out with, you've obviously spent decades in this work. What has driven you? Why is wilderness, wildlife, why do they matter to you?
I would say I'm one of those lucky guys who already knew since I knew as a little boy what I want to do in my life. And that was definitely working with nature for nature. I had the privilege to have a journey during a cold winter somewhere in the woods of Transylvania in those wonderful primeval forests together with my dad, who passed away meanwhile. I think I was just 4 or 5 years old. And he took me up on a ridge where we could see the big valleys with big forests, and it was January. It was the mating season for wolves, and suddenly out of the valley, I could hear them howling. I got shivers that are still with me today. So I wouldn't hide that wolf is my favorite of all, though I love all animals and bears and all the other smaller, bigger birds, amphibians, fish, everything. But wolves are very special to me. And that was the starting point. And from there on, I did everything in that direction, starting from the primary school with the high school, which already I had the chance to choose biology, the university, and so on. And it was just a little crossroad when I finished the study. I had a little bit of options. How many options do we have actually? It's government, non-government organization, or corporations. I would say in a country where corruption is at home, governmental positions were not an option for me. Neither corporations, because they were fresh in Romania after the fall of the communism, and they came for profit and not for doing right for environment. So therefore, I always work for NGOs. Greenpeace was indeed a very great experience, and all the learnings I gained during those wonderful years at Greenpeace, I'm using now for Agent Green.
Maybe you could talk a little bit about Agent Green, why you started it, what you're trying to accomplish, and maybe a little bit about lessons learned from Greenpeace.
Yeah, lessons learned from Greenpeace. Wow, that was quite an experience. First year, first major battle and victory. We actually had to deal with an American company who was very powerful in Romania, Monsanto. They spread their genes all over the country. 99% of soy was genetically engineered. And through high-profile campaign, you would not believe here in the US, but we managed to kick them out.
Wow.
They control politicians. They control scientific community. They control farmers association. but they did not control the public opinion. And they lost on that battle because people didn't like that those things, those new genes, were in their food and feed and in our fields and environment.
Yeah.
There was a mass outcry and the government had to do something.
Yeah.
So they made a U-turn and now the country is clean of GMOs.
That's amazing.
Yeah, that was a great first battle, and I took a very big pride in this because I think also we did follow up this one. So we basically now have Romania as a key country in Europe producing GMO-free protein from Europe. Which was previously mainly brought from South America, North America, you know, all those issues with deforestation in Amazon and so on.
Oh, yeah.
So we're starting to have more soy in Europe, so we depend less on imports from North and South America.
Wow. Good job.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I will always remember that.
Yeah.
And then I started to deal more and more with the forests because Romania, very few people would know, but it's the home of most of the primeval forest, or however we call it here in the US, call it virgin forest, old growth. Let's call it an untouched forest.
Yeah.
They're born by Mother Nature and develop under the influence of Mother Nature. And actually, Romania has more virgin forest than any other, than all the rest of Europe together.
Wow.
It's the primeval forest. It's the core of biodiversity, and there is also maybe the reason why we have so many brown bears and wolves and lynx. I mean, Romania alone has more brown bears than all the rest of Europe together. And there was the thing, I think it was in 2005 when there was a global study made by various American, Russian, and Scandinavian forestry experts scanning the planet of the last intact forest landscapes. This unbroken expanse of wilderness with a mosaic of ecosystems without infrastructure and human activity, and it's got to be more than 50,000 hectares.
Wow.
And they discovered through remote sensing and GIS kind of instruments that the last ones are in Northern America, Northern Canada, Northern Russia, Northern Scandinavia as boreal forests, or tropical forests in Amazon, Congo, and Indonesia, and in the temperate latitude, nothing. Just a little dot in Romania, and another one in Georgia on the other side of the Black Sea. And I say, wow, I got to see that.
Yeah.
It's here.
Yeah.
I call the team, the scientists, is that a mistake or the little dot is real? I say, no, that's real. That's real. Go get it. Go save it, because when we look from the sky, it didn't look good. There were threats from all around.
Right.
And it was true. I just went there and I found there was a highway construction completely illegal with no permits, just because the president of Romania wanted to make that road. Yeah, so they went full power, putting a heavy asphalt in through the middle of national parks and in the middle of that green little dot. So there was less than a week until I started immediately a campaign. Greenpeace was very cool and they allowed me to do that very fast. And in a few months we managed to stop that construction, and it still stopped.
Public opinion again? I mean, what did you do?
I don't know, must be just a Greenpeace brand that the politicians and the media fear so much that it was a evening news, first news, all papers, everything for weeks and weeks. So it was unbelievable. It's still unbelievable for me to see that happening. It wasn't resumed since they did some little work till 2007, but nothing afterwards. But still, we lost that intact forest landscape. I mean, there is still other wild areas, but it doesn't meet the criteria because of logging. It's so much logging all around.
Right.
The forestry model in Romania has changed so much in the past 2 decades. It's terrible. And that's why basically I decided at some point to switch from Greenpeace by making a more Romanian Greenpeace, and that's basically Agent Green. Greenpeace, as great as it is, it has its key campaigns and priorities somehow dictated by the international division. And it said we need to work in a very consistent way on forests. And with this, I answer one of your initial questions, and why forest and why working this way. I do think strongly that these last primeval forests and untouched, unspoiled areas are the connection from past to future. Without them, there is no future. When you go in one of those forests, I mean, except those trails on the sky left by airplanes, I can't say this is year 2018. I can easily say this is 5,000 before Christ.
Wow.
You don't see the difference.
That's amazing. Well,
it's wonderful. It's just to make a picture. It's imagine steep mountains with great valleys, with some alpine meadows, and the forest level includes mixed forest of beech with maple, with oak, with some softwoods a bit higher, like spruce and larch and fir trees, and beautiful rivers with clean streams, moss, mushrooms, forest fruits, bears roaming around. It's wolf packs, lynx, everything you can imagine. It's paradise on earth, and it's vanishing in front of our eyes with the participation of the government.
Yeah, that's heartbreaking. So you've been here with your colleagues for the last couple of weeks, and you've been going around, and you and others have talked with people who are coexisting or trying to coexist amicably with grizzly bears, and you're going to take lessons of all kinds back to Romania and your work there. Maybe you could share some of the things that surprised you that you found here that seem relevant to your work.
When we look at a bear situation here in Romania, I can find so many similar issues and problems, and also so much to learn in terms of solutions. What is similar is that we have bears, and then the bears it's the same species, just different subspecies. Grizzlies of US are a little bit bigger, a finger bigger. Ours looks the same, but maybe a tiny smaller, and behavior is quite similar. The difference is that we have actually, surprisingly, that was the first surprise, we have much more bears in a smaller territory. And I was a little bit surprised to hear there are so many troubles here with so few bears. I would even say that grizzly bear, I'm not sure if it can survive in such a small number as it is now. With these challenges I have seen here with climate change, which is rearranging the landscape, at least in Yellowstone, completely. I would say is the biggest challenge is it's the species survival, what I see here.
Yeah. No, we don't have any buffer, that's for sure. We don't have any spare bears around, and we're seeing...
It's definitely not enough.
Yeah. We're seeing an unprecedented spike. I mean, obviously this week... we got a ruling from Judge Christensen that restored endangered species protections to grizzly bears, but there's been so much killing and a lot of it, under investigation or possibly illegal, that it really makes you wonder. I mean, it's interesting to hear you say that I just look at a situation like Romania with 7,000 maybe more grizzly bears and so many people in the woods, even though, hopefully not industrial scale logging and that kind of thing, but even so... Even with the buffer, you've been able to stop trophy hunting. Yeah,
that was a very important moment just exactly 2 years ago. It came as a surprise for many, but it was actually just respecting the law. We have and the Berne Convention, which protects the brown bear quite strongly. And Romania is a signatory of the Berne Convention, but we are part of the European Union. We are a member of the European Union since January 2007. And basically, European Union does not allow trophy hunting and harvesting quotas. It's based on the legislation is in favor of managing the situation case by case. Is there a problematic bear? Then you have to prove it. You have to try alternative solutions. And if this doesn't work, then you can take him out. Only in this way. And you cannot plan how many bears will cause troubles. That was behind the decision of the minister in 2016 when they say, okay, everything that was before me, it was wrong. Me as a minister, I cannot go against the law. I have to respect the law. If others did, let them face the troubles later if that will be the case. And she just said that she will stop that, and she did. And since then, sorry?
No, what was the response?
The response the public supported the idea. There was a strong reaction from the trophy hunting industry only, which is a tiny part of our society, but they are very loud and they have a very strong lobby. And what happened afterwards, let's not call it a disaster, but it is a bad thing for the reputation of the bear, because they acted in such a way that they abandoned those feeding stations. By the way, trophy hunting was organized through feeding stations brought to the edge of the forest close to the local communities, because they would never want to spend money daily to go 10 kilometers deep in the forest or the feeding station to break their cars and consume petrol, because trophy hunting you can only do by making sure the bear will be there when a German or a Spanish or Italian or a British or a Dutch rich hunter would come to Romania to take out his trophy. And that's why they installed these feeding stations close to communities. And imagine what happened when they, as a boycott, they stopped putting feed in those feeding stations. The big ones went back to the wild and they found their way. The smaller ones were looking for new ways in crop fields, in households with livestock, in touristic area, garbage, and they used that. The hunters used that. They put it out in the media.
These are dangerous, terrible animals.
Yeah, but it's terrible because within 2 years only, the persecution of the bears has reached historical levels. So while people from cities, of course, they love the bears and they understand the situation well, and the people in the smaller communities have been, they are panicked. They don't know how to deal with this. The generations before, they coexisted with the bear. There was a great co-adaptation, but now suddenly there is a problem, and they also think it's too many bears and we have to shoot more. That's the whole thing behind it. Let them come to manufacture the idea that we have too many and we have to shoot them.
Yeah. It was the beginning of nearly the end for Yellowstone when we had fed the grizzly bears for decades and black bears in Yellowstone Park, and suddenly the research was showing that this was problematic for the Park Service and problematic for people, and they closed them, dumps, cold turkey, overnight. And bears just spilled into the local communities outside the park and died in droves.
Yeah, you feed them, you kill them.
Yeah. That's why they got listed under the Endangered Species Act in 1975, because the numbers were plummeting so quickly that no one knew if we were watching extinction happen. And it seems like a similar scenario is playing out, even though you have more bears.
Yes, and let's call them refugees. Romania is covered 1/3 with plains, 1/3 with hills and highlands, and 1/3 with mountains. 2 centuries ago, the vast majority of the countries, we're talking about 80%, was covered in woods. Now just 27%. And you can only find bears up in the mountains. They used to roam all the way between the Carpathians and the Danube River and the Black Sea, and down in the plains and the highlands and hills. Now you only find them in the mountains. That's why I'm saying they are refugees. It's not a place where they want to be. They like it everywhere.
Right.
So we have a problem with habitat destruction.
Right.
There is also threat on, even in the mountains, they go logging everywhere. There's the climate change and the human persecution. So regardless that we have 6 or 7 times more brown bears than U.S. has, at least except Alaska, it is a bigger problem. Just recently, They, of course, they want to reopen the trophy hunting, and it's a daily fight. We basically can never rest in this fight.
Yeah.
But as long as we fight, we have a chance.
Right.
And every year they found another way to reopen the trophy hunting. So far, in the last 2 years, we managed to block it because, for instance, we said and used again the EU law that you can not go for any kill without a national management plan. And they made a roughly on their knees management plan in a couple of months, which basically through one of the important things which took my attention away, actually blow it immediately, was that habitat destruction is so bad that the country cannot sustain that many birds. So we have to immediately go down from 6,000, 7,000, whatever we have, but methodology is controversial of counting them, to 4,000.
Right.
So that would mean culling of 2,000-3,000 as we speak, like that. Say, okay, so the government admits that they destroy the habitat.
Right.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
That's amazing, yeah.
Maybe you could talk a little bit about why the forests are being liquidated so quickly and the problem of your so-called protected landscapes, which was a surprise to me, that there's logging that's been permitted inside landscapes that we would otherwise think were protected.
Yeah, there is a dramatic change in the forestry model comparing to the past centuries when the forestry was based on, besides leaving some areas untouched for various reasons, protection of wildlife or protection of water sources or infrastructure. In production forest, there was extensive kind of logging, not intensive. No big openings, long production cycles, allowing old trees to stand or cutting only after every 120, 130 years, so always having big woods and areas of silence. Now it's completely changed. After the fall of communism, there was the invasion, I call it invasion, of foreign corporations. Opening large sawmills in Romania was not regulated. They're just allowed and even invited to come. We have, for instance, we managed 4 years to expose the single major driver within illegal logging. It's an Austrian company which was processing more softwood than it's legal to cut. Imagine they have 5 sawmills. Imagine one which is officially processing 1.2 million cubic meter of wood per year.
Whoa.
That's huge.
Wow.
It's absolutely huge. Through campaigning, we managed to bring the international attention on this. The companies lost their certificates and so on, and it's under the watch of the authorities. There is an ongoing prosecutor investigation within this company, similar with what was here in the US a few years ago with the lumber liquidators. If you remember the story with stealing wood from the Siberian tiger habitat, smuggling it through China and so on. So we have a similar issue, but there are still new companies coming and the government allows that. We've got Austrian sawmills, really big ones. One of them is the biggest board company in the world. Can we say names and things like this?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So the biggest one taking all the softwoods, it's Holzindustrie Schweighofer. And there's another one which is a mix of Swiss, Austrian, it's called Kronospan, and this is the biggest board company in the world.
Whoa.
You might not hear this brand, but you find it in IKEA products. Because IKEA, it's made of mainly boards and things like this, and its furniture includes boards from this. And there is other Austrian companies, and there is Turkish companies processing each of them between around 1 million cubic meter per year. And what we managed to do so far is to force a little change in the forestry code, the national forestry code, that no company is allowed to process more than 30% of the wood from a species. For instance, no more 30% of spruce or no more 30% of oak and so on. But it's too little. And then there actually some of the companies should shut down at least 1-2 sawmills. They're too big.
Yeah.
They're way too big. So the stress on the forest is huge. The state does not make enough intervention. And the National Forest Manager, Ram Silva, is just serving these companies. Same with the private owners. Let's say after restitution of forest, after the fall of communism, we have like 50% is private and 50% state-owned, and the stress is on both.
Right.
So right now we are turning away from forests with native species, with small openings and long production cycles, to a more intensive logging, replacing native species with monocultures. So all the bad things that Western Europe did in the past, and even here in the US in some parts.
Oh, learning all the wrong lessons. I mean, we fought these battles here. I mean, that was one of the campaigns that I first started on, was forests outside Yellowstone Park were basically being clear-cut. You could see images taken from space of the line of Yellowstone Park's western boundary as it was just liquidated, and all the wildlife suffered. Nobody had the guts to stand up to the government. We finally brought them down in court, but the damage was done. The damage is being done.
And this kind of forestry has no future.
No. And after we brought the case and won the case, the mills closed. I mean, that's what you would expect. They were over-harvesting in the first place. They should have, but if they had left several decades before, the damage, we wouldn't be suffering the damage we are. So you never break even with these unsustainable practices, and wildlife takes the biggest hit.
Wildlife, and I mean, if we step out of the skin of environmentalists, even if we have some empathy with the economy and industry, this is no sustainable business.
Right.
I mean, sustainable forestry includes small openings, selective logging, and have forever forests, never clear cut. This is just stupid lessons from the books with clear cut. It's time to rethink, think that, especially with the climate change, you might not get forest back ever if you do forestry in the wrong way. So I think small openings in production forest is the solution rather than big openings where you change everything. You change the water in the soil, you change everything.
I mean, one of the heartbreaking things is to see watch the models as they come out for projections of Yellowstone Park habitat. This is a landscape with no logging, and that's projected to be almost entirely grasslands due to climate change, because the fire frequency becomes so great that anything that can sustain a fire does. So even without logging, but when you put that on top, it's just a
I saw that disaster. For the past week. I have one word to what I have seen with the forest. It's sad. It's really sad.
Yeah. It's heartbreaking, and if you had asked me 35 years ago when I was starting in on this, if we would be seeing the impacts, the complete collapse of Yellowstone cutthroat trout in the core of the park, the collapse of whitebark pine, I would have said you're joking. I mean, and
the bark beetle attack everywhere. Yes. Like fire was not enough. Now there is the bark beetle attack. I guess it's not cold enough in the winter anymore.
No, it's not cold enough, and beetles are flourishing at the same time that these whitebark pine haven't co-evolved with beetles. They never, and they're sitting ducks. They have no chemical or physical defenses, and they're just getting clobbered, and it shows no sign of reversing. You add to that, the white pine blister rust, a disease that's been artificially introduced from Europe, and you basically, there's no future for this forest in this ecosystem. And the grizzly bears, until very recently, were absolutely dependent on it. And the food served to keep them away from a lot of contact with people. And in the fall, season where they need to fatten up.
I was actually in one of those spots where grizzlies used to feed with the seeds of the white pine bark, and it's close to this Dunraven Pass.
Yeah.
I could not see any new sign of grizzlies anymore. They're gone. I just saw excrements from the last years when they last fed with this.
Oh yeah.
And I thought it's one of the last places where I can still find this tree.
Yeah.
And it's almost gone.
No, it was a very predictable, you guaranteed to see their sign.
So that's why I come back to the beginning. I really don't know about the survival of this species, because it has to adapt faster than you could imagine any species can adapt.
Yeah. And we're essentially hemming them in all around the park, and even within the park. We're getting, over 4 million visitors a year now. Communities, people moving maybe for some laudable reasons to enjoy wildlife in our rivers and our mountains, but there's a lot more of us, and there's a lot more intolerant people too. And the rates of killing are outstripping the rates of reproduction, and at some point the math doesn't work. Which it sounds like you may be on the verge of a similar decline in Romania.
Yeah, and by the way, with the bark beetle attack, we have that already in Romania as well, big time. And sadly, the foresters are using it at max. It's an argument to go even inside national parks for logging, if you can imagine such a thing. I mean, thanks to the law, we are following the IUCN principles and rules in Romania. There should be no logging in national parks.
Absolutely.
But there is. And national parks, just to have a picture, the forests of national parks, it's just 1% of the surface of Romania.
Oh, wow.
It's close to nothing. And even in these national parks, so in this little 1%, half of them are being logged.
Oh, my God.
And one of the major arguments, it's the bark beetle attack. But now this happens also in beech forests, which have no bark beetle attack. And many of them are primeval forest. And they call it regeneration logging. So Mother Nature did wrong, and she needs to regenerate. And
she doesn't know how to do it.
And I went and I show a fresh footage made from the drone to the director of National Park. I say, what is this? I asked him, what is this? Oh, we have to, because it was too much deadwood and things like this, and we have to make opening, and wildlife likes it. I said, yes, but we have natural meadows. We have all these natural openings. Why do we have to make openings in places where bear is sleeping and feeding and drinking and mating and everything? This is his home. They're chasing them away. They don't have a place for silence anymore. So we are cutting half of our national parks right now. And of course, I'm a little bit happy when I get this in the media, and then there is a police intervention. Just the other day, there was a anti-corruption police unit just jumped into the office of this director of the national park, took away his computer, charged him with allegations on being a partner in illegal logging and poaching in the park and things like this. But the problem is that the government is still tolerating this and doesn't make any intervention for law enforcement. We have the law, but the law enforcement is a problem. And since it's so little wilderness left, don't think about much wilderness outside national parks. So it's all these great forests are mainly in national parks. If we are cutting this, then we're not losing just this forest, but their inhabitants. Those huge numbers of bears and wolves and lynx and all the other species around them. We speak about the brown bear as the king of the temperate forest, like the lion is the king of savanna. We look at the bear as the king of the temperate forest. And when we lose the bear, then we realize we're in trouble.
A little too late, perhaps.
Yeah, way too late.
Don't miss part 2 of my interview with Gabriel Paun, where we talk about corruption and violence, a different path forward, and our hopes for the future. It was so good I didn't want to cut any of it.